Well, I could fall asleep to that music, couldn't you? All right, we've invited a special guest here today in this offering moment, and he flew in from Pennsylvania, and he actually slept overnight in the church. So, without any further ado, let's reveal our special guest today. Yes, anybody know what this is? This is the Shroud of Turin. We're going to look at a couple elements today that I think is going to change your faith. It's going to change your mind about a few things. Hopefully it'll boggle your mind. The Shroud of Turin, which hangs in Turin, Italy, is the most examined. It's the most investigated or studied artifact, religious or non, in the history of the world. That's a huge statement in itself. Every so many years, the Shroud of Turin will be on display for anyone who wants to come, and the people will line up for 10 hours a day. But they'll be a little disappointed because when they get to the Shroud of Turin and they get to see it face-to-face in natural light, there's not a lot on there. They can see the bare sort of sketch bones of a body there with a little blood and things like that, but it's not until you take a picture of the Shroud of Turin and go back home and get it developed if you have a 35 millimeter camera, and you get to see the negative from the imprint, and this is what the negative looks like. This is basically what the camera picks up is the radiation that is coming off the shroud. And we're going to explain how that's powerful in a moment. This is a life-size replication of the Shroud of Turin. There is a backside. The shroud went the complete length of the body, looped around the back, top of the head, and then it's on its back. We didn't bring the back in today because it's just too much of an artifact to be up on the stage for this little length of time, as well as it's too, for church service, it's too depictive of the person that was crucified in this shroud. It's too violent. But what we can see in this shroud, now there's 4 places on this shroud where it was in a fire in 1530, and these are patches, as you can see, and they were sewn back together by nuns. This has survived several fires throughout its history, and we're going to talk just a little bit about that in a minute. We have right here a healthy male who's about 30 to 35 years of age. The figure here is about 5'10", about 175 pounds, and the body is in a state of rigor mortis, which means it is lurching or leaning forward from its death state. The left leg here is a little higher than the right leg because for a length of time when this body expired, the leg was over one another as it was pinned through the act of crucifixion through a spike in both of its ankles, and you can see the spike mark there right where the hand and the wrist intersect as well. There are no stains, no dyes, or no artificial powders found on this shroud. Everything you see here is a radiation or reflection of natural processes of the body. So blood, plasma, other ammonia, different things that would be found normally on a body. Now, today is not an apologetic to whether we prove this is the burial cloth of Jesus or not. But this is the closest you will ever come to seeing an actual crucifixion. In a few minutes, we're going to give some YouTube sites. I had the privilege over COVID to take 40 college hour classes from one of the greatest Christian apologists in the world, Dr. Gary Habermas, who is friends with our Every Nation World and good friends with our founder, Rice Brooks, helping and some have a hand in developing our God's Not Dead book series as well. Gary Habermas has spoken all over the world. He's been an adjunct professor at Oxford, Cambridge, Biola, Liberty University, spoken all over the world. We're going to post some of his so you can go and investigate this further. That's our desire today, is for you to take this further than this little offering moment today. There are over 230 lashes on this body from a Roman flagrum. There are 9 major puncture wounds in the crown or the head of this man from the crown of thorns that this man had worn. There's a massive puncture wound through the 5th and 6th vertebrae on the right side of his body that went all the way into his pleural cavity, which is the cavity around the heart. His upper lip has been separated from his teeth and was bashed into his nose from the great beating that he took on his face. There's massive contusions on his shoulders from, no doubt, carrying the patibulum or the heavy weight of the cross-section of the cross. At this point, his wrist again and his ankles are punctured through, his beard is violently plucked out, and his eyes are basically swollen shut. We'll talk about that in a minute. There is no record of any archaeological representation other than this of a man being so severely crucified in all of archaeology. And again, like I said, this is the closest picture of a crucifixion, especially in the same line that Jesus was crucified, that you'll ever see, or as close as you'll ever get, hopefully. One of the most amazing things that I want to talk about in just a few minutes we have left is the last 20 years of technology has brought amazing things in the science of what we see before us. And that is electron microscopy, which is basically the science, electron microscopes dissecting this into some amazing revelation. The first being is the pollen footprint that's all over this shroud. With electron microscopy, you can follow the pollen, you can find out everywhere this shroud has been. And what's amazing about this shroud, you find out that it's been in Palestine, it's been in the Middle East, it's been in Jerusalem, it's been all the way up and through Turkey, it's been to Constantinople. Now, some of these things we know by history, but we also have now proven this through pollen. And we can carbon date that pollen. It's all dated plus or minus about 70 years around the 1st century. We also know that the pollens migrated into Europe, into France, and then finally into Italy. And it's all through the pollen fingerprint. The second amazing revelation that we have here is at the very bottom here where the victim's feet are is a lot of limestone dust that's only intrinsic or special to Jerusalem itself. So the mineral composition of the limestone is only found in Jerusalem, or would be within, as this body would have been in a tomb in Jerusalem. And that is truly amazing. The third thing, the third aspect of electron microscopy that I find the most fascinating, and we can put up that slide, is that there are two small coins. Basically, we would consider them like pennies today. If you're watching this in a pre-digital money age, there are things covering its eyes. And what's unique, there's a coin right there in the corner. And what these are, what is so unique about these are leptons of Tiberius Caesar, more notably Pontius Pilate. And these were minted between the years of 29 AD and 32 AD. So if you want anything that, and this is only found in the last about 15 years through electron microscopy, they're able to identify the writing of Tiberius Caesar on these coins. So if there's been skeptics throughout the centuries about this is some medieval type of forgery, it would have been very difficult not only to reproduce the fact of all the things we've talked about so far, but to know that we should put Tiberius Caesar's, Pontius Pilate's leptons over the eyes of this, which makes this an amazing fact. You know, we have hundreds and hundreds of first century burial cloths. And when they take the radiated image or a stilled image from a photograph, not one of them reproduces an image of any kind. And you know, I got to thinking about this. This is kind of like what most scientists, nuclear engineers, pathologists consider a gamma ray burst form of radiation that was literally in the nanoseconds. Robert Borland, he was the chief pathologist of the project in 1978 and later in 1982. He was also the chief pathologist, if you didn't know, of the city of Los Angeles. In fact, a composite of his life work and his sort of character was taken and was used as a model for the very first CSI television program. Years ago, Jack Klugman played him as the actor, and it was called Quincy. I don't know if any of you watch TV Land, but Quincy, that composite image person was the man that was the chief pathologist on the shroud. And here's one of his main takeaways. He says, because the blood, the whole stain pattern was so intact, the shroud was never removed from this body. Because if it had been, and the tearing away from that separation would have created all kinds of decomposition marks that could be found today in the shroud. So what happened? What happened to this gamma burst of radiation that suddenly produces this image that no other burial cloth of its time or its age produced? My personal theory is that we might be witnessing here the power of resurrection. In that 1 nanosecond, that burst of gamma ray power and radiation, where he was and now was not, and was was somewhere else, and he revisited the disciples, remember, several times after his death. And if you have to deal with it, that this is representing the power of his resurrection, then you have to deal with what Jesus talked about for you and I. Now, how many of you know, as a skeptic, that's about the last thing I want to deal with, was the power not only of Jesus' resurrection, because with our faith, without a resurrection, there is no faith. Simon of Cyrene saw this condition just like this in Jesus when he met him. Again, we talked about this last week at the 5th point of the crucifixion on the Via Dolorosa. You know, over the last 4 years, we've talked literally about hundreds of figures that we get up here every week and inspire you and I with their generosity, sacrifice throughout history, great or small. We love these people. We think they're amazing. But yet every one of those people was modeling a life after this picture of sacrifice. We're going to put a slide up, I don't think we've done it just yet, but of 2 YouTube videos to get your sort of education quest started. And they are from Dr. Gary Habermas, a PhD, probably the world's most renowned authority on the life, death, burial, and resurrection and early church history of Jesus, as well as he's written 2 full books on the shroud. And again, that's the first one. On the bottom one is Dr. Gary Habermas and nuclear engineer Robert Rucker, who goes through all the sort of miscalculations done by various attempts to carbon date this, because carbon dating becomes a mess with this, because carbon dating bounces all over the place once it radiates away from the body of Jesus, or body of this man here in the shroud. That leads you to another idea that the gamma burst radiation created a whole series of effects that we now see. Again, you and I will never see anything closer to the resurrection than what we see here. You know, to me, this represents the generosity. How could we be more generous than this picture? Because just like Jesus, this man suffered all those things, except Jesus suffered them for you and I. That you and I could be completely and totally free. We kind of stay away from this, right? We wear crosses around our neck. We sort of treat it more of a social aspect. We have crosses as part of our culture, but this was a sign of tremendous torment and torture, but it was a gift from God for you and I. We're going to spend the last 10 seconds of looking. We're going to take another aspect of modern technology, only available in the last 10 years, is they've taken the dynamics of this face and made a 3D representation of what's here on the shroud, and you're going to get to see that right here as we close this offering moment today. Isn't that amazing what modern technology can do? Heavenly Father, we pray over this Easter weekend that in some way we can understand and get to know Jesus a little better in this moment. He can't be here physically with us today, but some of his representation is here. It's found on these beautiful yet violent marks on this shroud. And whether this is Jesus or not, Jesus went through the same thing that this man did. He did this for you and I. Father, I can't think of a more generous statement of all those heroes that we talk about every week. They were all pointing to this hero. How could I not exemplify that sense of sacrifice and generosity throughout my life, throughout my children's life, throughout the legacy that my wife and I leave here on the earth? I have no other choice. I am ruined. When I see that 3D picture, I am ruined for this world.
We hope you enjoyed that video. We're always posting new content, so go ahead and click the subscribe button now to subscribe to Every Nation City Church channel. God bless you.